international. We are picking back up with the laws of prayer in Mishneh Torah. We're finishing up the 6th chapter. I believe we left off around the 6th law of the 6th chapter. When is the beginning of a haircut regarded? So this is again giving a little backup. We're talking here about different things that a person should or should not get involved doing before he has prayed the afternoon prayer, the afternoon daily prayer. So getting a haircut is one of those things. And we also already said that if the time for the afternoon prayer arrived and a person was already involved in any of these things, he is not required to stop doing them. He's only not to begin doing them after that time has arrived. So when is the time for getting a haircut regarded as having begun? Once the rag or cloth has been placed over his legs, and that which would prevent the fallen hair from getting all over his clothes. And from when is one regarded as having entered a bathhouse or begun the bathing that is done in the bathhouse? From the time that he removes the clothing which is opposite his skin, meaning even his underclothes. So once a person has done that, he even removed his underclothes, then he can know that he already began in the process of bathing, and he does not need to stop and pray the afternoon prayer, but rather he can continue on and just finish up before the time for the afternoon prayer passes. But if he was already at the bathhouse and he was already removing his clothes and the time for the afternoon prayer arrived, and he took off his jacket, for example, let's say, but he did not yet remove his underclothing, so then he hadn't yet officially started, and therefore he shouldn't begin in any case the bathing, but he should first pray the afternoon prayer and then return to doing what he wanted to do. So last week I wasn't sure about the meaning of bursakim because I didn't have my handy little Mishneh Torah which clarifies difficult or rare terms. And I thought that this has something to do with like trading or like investing because of the similarity to the modern Hebrew word bursa for like Wall Street type place. But bursaki actually refers to tanning of skins, according to this commentary. Let me see the question that's placed here. Romero asks, are we not supposed to bathe before saying the morning prayers? So it depends on the circumstances. This isn't talking about a regular bath for cleanliness. Bathing in a bathhouse was a whole ordeal in and of itself. There are actually certain circumstances where a person ideally would bathe. We covered that about 2 weeks ago. It may be online. If not, that would mean that it was last week's, but I'm pretty sure it's already online. Look for the laws of prayer, chapter 4 or chapter 5. But one is not required to take a whole bath before any of the prayers. He's only required for all of the prayers that he wash his hands in a particular way before he prays. In the morning prayers, as taught in chapter 4, he's supposed to wash his face, hands, and feet. But if he doesn't wash his hands and feet, his prayer is still regarded as legitimate so long as he washed his hands. And even the washing of hands doesn't invalidate one's prayer as legitimate if the water was a certain distance away. In that case, he can simply rub his hands and then fulfill the obligation of prayer. And from when is beginning the tanning process regarded? Once he ties between his shoulders in the manner that the craftsmen are accustomed to do. What does it mean by tying there? Let's see if I can figure out for you. So this is in reference to the tying of a type of apron that would protect one's clothing or skin from the filth of the leather or hides that are going to be tanned. And when is the beginning of eating regarded? And for the people who dwell in the land of Israel, eating is regarded as having begun from the time that he washes his hands. This is talking about eating for a meal. And to those who live in Babylon, from the time that he loosens his belt, releases his belt, then it's regarded that he began eating. Again, keeping in mind, all of these things is so that one will know whether or not he has already begun any of the actions that a person shouldn't begin doing once the time for the afternoon prayer arrives. But if he had already begun, then he need not stop what he began doing, but rather he finishes it, so long as he has time left to say the afternoon prayer, and then he prays afterwards. And when is the beginning of an adjudication regarded? From the time that the Dayanim enshroud or cloak themselves, assumedly with a talit, and are seated. And if they were already seated, seated. So if they were already seated when the time of the afternoon prayer arrived, then they're considered as having begun judgment from the time that the lawyers begin their deliberation. Even though the nighttime prayer is voluntary, a person shouldn't come from his occupation or work and say to himself, a person shouldn't say to himself after he comes back from work regarding the nighttime prayer that I will eat a little bit, drink a bit, and sleep a little, take a rest, and afterwards I'll pray. He shouldn't say this even though the nighttime prayer is voluntary. There could be a few reasons for this. First of all, we must emphasize that the nighttime prayer we're talking about here is the standing prayer, the prayer done at night that we do standing, which is usually referred to as the Amidah or the Shmona Esrei. That is voluntary. The people of Israel voluntarily took it upon themselves as though it is obligatory. But again, it is not technically obligatory. In contrast to the recitation of the nighttime Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and the accompanying blessings with that recitation. If a person plans to say the nighttime prayer, it's said immediately following the recitation of the nighttime Shema. So, in that case, postponing saying the nighttime prayer would even be postponing the recitation of the nighttime Shema, which is not merely voluntary, but is actually obligatory. Also, if a person intends to endeavor in doing a good deed, even if he voluntarily took it upon himself, that deed, if it's a good deed, then it's a mitzvah. He fulfills the commandment in doing so. And there's a general principle of once having decided to do something good, to fulfill that decision. You see a similar concept with regard to those who decide to convert and then afterwards forsake their intention, even if they still would think that it would be ideal. Continuing. So, even though the nighttime prayer is voluntary, a person shouldn't be postponing it, saying he'd eat and snack a bit or rest, and then afterwards pray. שמא תאנוס את השינה ונמצא ישן כל הלילה, lest his sleep coerce him or overtake him, and he ends up sleeping all the night. אלא מתפלל עברית ואחר כך אחר ושותה וישן. Rather, first the person should pray the nighttime prayer, and afterwards he eats and drinks and sleeps. מותר להסתפר ולהיכנס למרחץ סמוך לשחרית. And it is permitted to get a haircut or to enter a bathhouse right before the time for the morning prayer. This is permitted because the sages, Hazal, they did not make a decree regarding the prohibition of doing these actions before prayer with regard to the morning prayer. They only made these enactments, these edicts, with regard to doing these actions before the afternoon prayer. And this conveys to us a very important principle. Note that the afternoon prayer, these actions are often done before the afternoon prayer. It's something that exists, is commonplace, and most people do them. But with the morning prayer, most people do not do these things before the morning prayer. And there's a principle that is known and brought in the laws of Sanhedrin and the laws of rebellious elders, also in Mishnah Torah, that the decrees of the sages, the decrees of the great Sanhedrin, were decrees made with regard to things that were commonplace. They didn't make decrees, broad decrees applicable to all the population for things that almost never happen or are extremely exceptional. So simply from this one principle, which the Rambam knew, he establishes that even though these things are not proper to do, there's technically no restriction to do them before the morning prayer, even if technically they're not proper to do. One who does them does not violate anything. And of course, as Romero pointed out, it could even be that to take a bath or a shower in the morning, also even before afternoon, in any situation, if you're doing it in preparation for prayer, that could even be something positive. But entering a bathhouse is usually also for relaxation and a whole array of different health-related benefits. The 8th law of chapter 6. A person who was occupied in the learning of Torah when the time for prayer arrived, he should cease learning, even though he was already occupied in learning, and he should pray. But if he was a person whose learning of Torah was his craft, it was that which he was always occupied in, and not just at this particular moment, and he doesn't do any other occupation but this. For example, somebody who teaches the written Torah to children or to anybody else, learning Torah is his occupation. So if he's such a person and the time for prayer arrives, and he was occupied in the time for prayer, and he was occupied in his Torah study when the time for prayer arrived, he does not stop his Torah learning. For the commandment of delving into Torah studies is greater than the commandment for prayer. And all those who are occupied in the needs of the multitude of the public, so they are as though they are occupied in the words of Torah. This makes a very important and fundamental point. You see a parallel between the learning of Torah and one who is occupied in taking care of the needs of the public, showing us that the significance of learning Torah over the significance of prayer is not due to some kind of mystical superiority that learning Torah has over prayer. but rather a practical superiority. That the greatness learning Torah has over prayer is that learning of Torah teaches us how to relate to other individuals and to improve ourselves and the whole world around us. Just as those who, though not involved in learning Torah, are occupied with the needs of the public in other ways. They are also said to be as though occupied in Torah, and therefore they do not need to cease what they're doing when the time for prayer arrives. But one who prays, in contrast to these two, his prayer is between himself and God and is not proactively, not causing an immediate, shouldn't be expected to cause an immediate effect on his surroundings. So it takes second place. Also, one of the major values in prayer is its ability to affect us and change us so that we will do good deeds. But even that is dependent upon our knowledge of what good to do and how much contemplation a person puts into that, independent of prayer. And that is related to the study of Torah, the category called Talmud Torah. The ninth law. A person who is in the middle of prayer, we're talking about the Shmona Esrei, praying the standing prayer. He shouldn't interrupt his praying, except for in the case of a life-threatening situation. Even if the king of Israel were to greet him, lo yeshivanu, the individual who's praying should not answer. The individual who's praying should not even answer the greetings of the king of Israel. Think about this. This could even be the Messiah. Kind of goes against the idea of the divinity of the Messiah. Well, in that case, your prayer would be communion with him in any case. But if one is in the midst of prayer and a non-Jewish king greeted him, he should cease his prayer lest the non-Jewish king kill him, because this is a concern for a life-threatening situation. Just a moment. I have no idea who this is, so I'll just leave that to Mr. Asher. Someone called you. They made music. If a person was standing in prayer and he saw that a non-Jewish king was approaching him, or one who coerces a person who is a suspect of violence and danger, but neither this non-Jewish king nor this suspicious person approaching him has yet fully approached him, but is merely coming in his direction, in that case he should shorten his prayer. But if he sees that the situation would not allow him to shorten his prayer in order to avoid the danger, then he should cease where he is, even though the king hadn't yet greeted him, or the individual suspect of danger hasn't yet entirely approached him. And likewise, if one saw serpents or scorpions coming towards him, if they had already arrived to him, and it was the standard of these snakes and scorpions and the like in that location that they are deadly, then in such a case the person should stop in the midst of his prayer and flee, obviously. And also, of course, if the person is not even sure if the person is simply not sure whether or not these snakes or scorpions or whatever else is deadly in his location, then he should also likewise cease That's understood because you're supposed to know and learn Jewish law holistically. So, not only spending years and years on one topic. So if you do that, you will know from the laws of murder and the guarding of one's soul that it is a Torah prohibition to endanger anyone's life in any case, including yourself. Remember, love your neighbor as yourself. You can't love them if you don't love yourself. And it says in the first chapter of Hillchot Mamrim, the law of rebellious judges, that if you have a doubt regarding something that concerns a Torah commandment, and you have a doubt regarding something that is rabbinic, then that with which you have a doubt concerning the Torah's commandments you should be strict with, and you should be lenient with the doubt concerning rabbinic law. So in any case where you have suspicion, even if you're not certain that the animals in that area is dangerous, you should thoroughly guard your soul and fulfill God's commandments above the decreed instructions of the sages for less critical things. The last law of this chapter, Law 10. Nashim wa avodim qtanim hayavim batefillah. Women and servants and minors, they are all obligated in prayer. And any individual who is exempt from the recitation of the Shema is likewise exempt from the recitation and the praying of the established prayers, the Amidah. You can find what people are exempt from the recitation of Shema in the laws of Shema. This is, of course, talking about those individuals who are obligated in reciting Shema. Women and minors are not, for sure women are not. I'm pretty sure minors also are not obligated in reciting Shema. But they are still specified as being obligated in the daily prayers. And notice the Rambam never makes a distinction in the amount of times that a woman should pray in a day and the amount of times that a man should pray in a day. They are presumably equally obligated. Likewise with all of the 5 things that inhibit one from fulfilling his obligation to pray, and the 8 things that should be done during prayer, but if not done, do not delegitimize the prayer. All equally applying to women. And all those who escort the dead, like pallbearers, even if there's not a technical need for them to help in moving the dead or accompanying the dead, they are exempt from the prayer. That concludes chapter 6 of the laws of prayer. Any questions? So beginning chapter 7, the first law. When the sages of the Great Sanhedrin instituted the words of prayer that we've been discussing until now in the laws of prayer, they also established different blessings of praise to the Creator that one should bless every day. And these are those extra blessings that they instituted in addition to the daily standing prayer. When a person enters his bed to go to sleep at night, he should bless. Blessed are you, O transcendent Lord, our venerable authority, King of the universe, who casts the bonds of sleep upon my eyes and enlightens the pupil of my eye. May it be favorable before you. May it be your will, Adonai Elohai, O transcendent Lord, my venerable authority. شتفصلاني ميسر را ميتارع را, that you deliver me, rescue me from the evil tendency or the destructive inclination, ميتارع را, and from any bad or destructive encounter. And may it be your will that disturbing or bad dreams not frighten me, nor evil contemplations. And may my bed be wholesome before you, or whole before you. And cause me to arise from it, from my bed, to life and to peace. And may you enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Blessed are you, O transcendent Lord, who gives light to all the world. And after blessing this blessing, when one enters his bed to go to sleep at night, he then recites the first of the 3 sections of Kriyat Shema. He only has to recite the first of those 3. If the person recited Shema before the appearance of 3 stars in the night, then he should recite all 3 sections of the Shema recitation so as to fulfill his Torah obligation. Reciting the Shema, even if you say the standing prayer immediately following it, but you do so before the appearance of the 3 stars, you do not fulfill your Torah obligation for reciting Kriyat Shema. So in that case, again, he must read those 3 sections at this point after saying the blessing before going to sleep. And this is the origin of the custom that most people today, even if they said Shema after the appearance of 3 stars, they will again say the 3 sections at this point, because throughout Europe there was widespread practice to recite Shema before night. And if sleep overcame him, so if sleep was overtaking him, he was extremely exhausted and wasn't managing to say the entire first section of Shema, then it is enough that he simply recites the first verse of Shema, or any other verses that recall God's compassions, and afterwards he may go to sleep. At the time when he wakes up at the end of his sleeping in the night, he says the following blessing while he is on his bed, and it is thus: O my venerated one, O my God, the soul that you gave in me is pure. You created it and you formed it. And you breathed it within me, and you guard it within my midst. And in the future you will take it up from me. And in the future you will return it to me, in the future to come, in the coming future. And all the while, all the time that my soul is within me, I shall be grateful before you, O transcendent Lord, my venerable authority, Lord of all works, Master of all works. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed or worshipful are you, O transcendent Lord, who returns souls to lifeless bodies. Note that at the time when one wakes up, you do not find in Mishneh Torah any reference to saying Modeh ani lefonecha melech hay v'kayam shehizarta bi nishmati b'hamla rabba emunotecha. This is a later little prayer that was essentially invented at a later point in time after the great influence of mystical teachings, and it is based upon a short phrase that appears in this blessing that we just read and I translated for you. The blessing that I just read and that's mentioned here and translated for you is what's mentioned in the Talmud. The popular Moda'ani doesn't appear anywhere in the Talmudic literature. But again, as I mentioned, it is the Moda'ani is based upon a short phrase in this blessing that does appear in the Gemara, where it says, at all times that my soul is within me, I shall be grateful before you, O Lord my God. Moving on to the fourth law. When one hears the sound of a rooster, he blesses. Through this list of blessings, I'm just going to say Baruch Atah instead of saying the entire first part of the blessing, which is stated in all of these blessings, so as not to disturb people who are not used to hearing God's name read just for the sake of learning. I don't want to offend people if I don't have to. So when you hear a rooster crow, you say Baruch Atah Hashem and so forth, who gives to the rooster understanding, to understand or distinguish between day and night. When a person puts on his clothing, he blesses. Baruch Atah, blessed are you, worshipful are you. Malbish arumim, who clothes the naked. When a person places his sheet upon his head, what kind of imagery does that give you? So they used to wear turbans and things similar to what they still wear in Saudi Arabia. It's just a fact, sorry. When one puts on his head covering, his head garment, he blesses. Worshipful are you, O Lord, ... who crowns Israel with splendor or beauty. When he passes his hands over his eyes, meaning he's wiping his eyes in the morning upon waking up, when he does so, he blesses Baruch Atah Adonai, blessed are you, O Lord, ... who opens the eyes of the blind. When one sits up on his bed, he blesses. Baruch Atah, blessed are you, O Lord, Melech Ha'olam, Matir Aturim, who releases the bounds. Blessed are you, who releases the bounds. When he lowers his legs from his bed and he places them upon the ground, he blesses. Baruch Atah, blessed are you, ... who established the land upon the waters. When he stands, he blesses. Baruch Atah, worshipful are you, O Lord. Zuqef Kefufim, who straightens the bent. When he is going to wash his hands, he blesses. Mevorech. Tehillah, first he blesses. Note it's emphasized in contrast to the other blessings. Here he blesses before he does the action, before washing his hands. Baruch Atah, blessed are you, O Lord. Who sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us regarding the lifting of hands. Natilat Yodayim is often used in modern Hebrew, even in yeshivish, in reference to any washing of hands. But the term literally means lifting of hands. Natilah in Hebrew means to lift up. It has simply become an idiom for washing hands, but that is not what it literally means. The reason for this is because when one ritually washes his hands before prayer or eating, he's supposed to lift his hands upward. When he washes his face, he blesses. Baruch Atah, worshipful are you, O Lord, ... who passes sleep from my eyes and drowsiness from my eyelids. May it be your will, may it be favorable before you, O Transcendent Lord, my venerable authority, the venerable authority of my forefathers. That you should habituate me in matters of commandments, and not cause me or allow me to be habituated in matters of transgression, and cause the good inclination to roll in me, and may the evil inclination or the destructive inclination not roll in me. And strengthen me in your commandments, and grant me my portion in your Torah. And grant me grace and compassion and mercies in the eyes, in your eyes, and in the eyes of all who see me. And graciously bestow upon me benevolent mercies from before you, from before your presence. Baruch atah, blessed are you, O Transcendent Lord, who bestows benevolent compassion. And any time when an individual enters the bathroom, he says before he enters. And notice what I'm about to say now. The law says that the person says this in contrast to blessing or praising this. From that you know that this is not directed to any conscious being of any sort, even though there is anthropomorphism here and what do you call it, metaphorical terminology. So before going into the bathroom, one says the honored or respected, respectable ones or honored ones, kadoshim, holy ones or inviolables, that which shouldn't be corrupted, servants of the Most High, of the Supreme One. Shimruni, shimruni, guard me until I enter and until I come out. For this is the way of the sons of men. Now many of the early commentators commenting on this particular law understood it as referring to a person's mental faculties, which are to be as often as possible occupied in words of Torah and good deeds. But before one enters the bathroom, upon entering the bathroom, a person should not be contemplating words of Torah, except for those that are necessary in order to not do anything prohibited. And as taught elsewhere, it is a commandment and incumbent upon a person to say all the words of Torah he needs in the bathroom in order to prevent transgression. But that these words, where it says be honored or be respected or respectable ones, the early commentators understood this to be in reference to the sanctified faculties of the individual who serves God. That though you are ceasing the contemplation of God's Torah upon entering the bathroom, when you leave, you should take them back upon yourself. You should begin them again. And in the merit of thinking words of Torah and contemplating on God's will, that when you're in the bathroom, there will be no harm. In the old days, bathrooms could be dangerous. You see that indicated in different places. So that's the concept behind this. That a person be aware of the respect that should be given to God's Torah, even in contemplation, and also be aware that God's mercy, while God is compassionate and has grace upon us more than we deserve, even that is dependent upon at least a little bit of effort, a little bit of desire on the part of the individual to do God's will. And so, in that regard, the Torah of the individual guards him while he is in the bathroom. And then after he leaves the bathroom, he blesses this when he leaves the bathroom. Baruch atah, blessed are you, who formed man in wisdom, or with wisdom, ورب نقوبين نقوبين وحلوليم حلوليم, and who created in him, in man, many exits or orifices and many cavities. مهن فتوحيم ومهن فتوميم. Among them there are those that are open and there are those among them that are closed. But if one among them should be closed that shouldn't be closed, and one among them should open that shouldn't be opened, he would not be able to continue existing even for a single hour. Blessed are you, O Lord, who heals all flesh and is doer of wonders. The sixth law of chapter 7. When a person puts on his belt, he blesses, worshipful are you, O Lord, who girds Israel with strength. When a person puts on his shoes, he blesses, blessed are you, O Lord, who has made me all my needs, provided for me for all my needs. When a person is going to depart on his way, the wording of the Rambam is interesting here. Could literally means going or walking, but then after that he says to depart on his way. So it could definitely be understood as meaning, this is even pretty much the basic meaning of it, that even though mahallech literally means going, since it comes before the word to depart, it's talking about before the person actually left, but when he's preparing to go. So when doing so, a person blesses, Baruch atah, blessed are you, O Lord, who establishes the steps of man. And every day a man should bless, Baruch atah, blessed are you, O Lord, who did not make me a non-Jew. What this literally means and is usually used, I gave you the typical translation, but the term goy is usually used in the context of the Talmud and also in Mishnah Torah, not in reference to just any non-Jew, but non-Jews who are idolaters, which is presumed from Talmudic times before the rise of Islam and Christianity, that the majority of people throughout the world were idolaters. A non-Jew who is in the process of joining the faith of Israel, for example, even though he hasn't yet even officially joined, is, at least within the terminology of the Rambam, different from the status of a goy. Baruch atah, blessed are you, O Lord, shelar asani aved, who has not made me a servant. A person should be grateful that he was not put into a situation of servitude or born into it. And note, in contrast to the next blessing, these two, although a person may be born into a setting that gives them that status, they have the ability to rise above that status. But we are grateful to God at where we are now, that despite the extra burdens that overcome the Jewish people, and despite the extra responsibility, that it is worth it, and we are grateful to God for that. In addition, one should say every day, Baruch atah, blessed are you, O Lord, shelo asani isha, for not making me a woman. This is in reference, traditionally understood as being in reference, not that a man is superior to a woman in essence, but that a man has the opportunity to do many different commandments of God that are incumbent upon him that are not incumbent upon a woman, lest he be overwhelmed with or become enters self-pity over the matter that he has so many more obligations, looking at how his wife doesn't necessarily have to take care of all these different matters that Jewish men are supposed to take care of, but rather he should be grateful to God for his extra responsibility and realize the difficulties that come along with being a woman and the benefit that comes along with being a man. These 18 blessings, which is parallel to the original amount of blessings in the standing prayer, that's why we call it the Shmona Esrei, The sages made lots of parallels in their laws. So these 18 blessings that we just went through, that are not part of the standing prayer but are parallel. And Allah said they do not have an official order that a person must say them in. Allah مبارك كل أحد مهنا على دبر شهب برخاء بشبلا. Rather, a person blesses them upon the doing of the action or matter that the blessing is instituted with regard to, at the time of the doing of that thing. For example, the one that praises God for giving the rooster knowledge and understanding to differentiate between day and night, you say that blessing when you hear a rooster. You don't just say it whenever you want. Okay, so what is implied? For example, if a person put on his belt while he's still in his bed, he still blesses who girds Israel with strength, even though he's on his bed. We will pick up next week, guys, Hashem, possibly in a different land. It's been fun being with you guys. All the best. Chodesh Tov, Muvarach, Shabbat Shalom. Eliyahu, you have a question? Eliyahu, you have a question? You must have come in a little bit late. I was originally saying exactly as they were written, and then I explained that I didn't want to be saying God's name over and over and over again, even though there's nothing wrong with doing so. But I didn't want to do so excessively, because there are so many of these blessings, so as not to offend people who are unaware of the law that it's totally permitted to do so in the context of learning. So no, the Rambam did not do that. It's included in the text. All the best to you guys.